My roommate has been catfishing a guy for 5 years using my photos. He showed up at our door, thinking I was his girlfriend, and she'd been sending him pictures of me in my underwear. When I moved out, I found a notebook where she'd been documenting my entire life and practicing my signature. My best friend Maggie and I are roommates, and we moved in together 2 years ago. About 5 years ago, Maggie spent spring break a couple states away and matched with a guy on Tinder. When she came back to campus, she immediately told me all about him. She bragged about how amazing he was and how they'd only gone out to dinner once, but they were already talking 24/7. I got super excited for her since her dating life had been basically non-existent for ages. I asked to see a picture of him, and that was the only time I ever saw what he looked like. Over the past 5 years, he's been her entire world. She talks about him constantly, always has her nose buried in her phone, and gets ridiculously clingy when he takes too long to text back. There hasn't been a single day where I haven't heard about this guy. Since he sends presents and flowers on Valentine's Day, I figured they were practically dating. So I asked her why they never met up again, and she said they were both too busy and broke to make the trip. I suggested letting him stay with us, but she always refused. I didn't bring it up often because, at the end of the day, it wasn't my business. That was until yesterday. Maggie had picked up a shift at work, so I was home alone all day. I was planning to just relax when I heard a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, but when I opened it, there was a guy standing there who I'd never seen before. He gasped and looked incredibly happy. He said hi, and I said hi back, but I was obviously very confused. He looked jittery and nervous at first. Then, out of nowhere, he barged in and scooped me up into a huge hug. I just froze, having no idea how to react. He told me, "I thought you were working? I was hoping your roommate would be here so I could surprise you when you got back." I still had no clue who this guy was, so I begged to be put down. I backed away from him and told him I didn't know who he was. He laughed and said, "Come on, Maggie, it's me." I quickly let him know I wasn't Maggie, and I didn't understand why he would think that since we look nothing alike. It took a minute for both our brains to process what was happening. He asked me, "If you're not Maggie, who are you?" "I'm Summer, Maggie's roommate," I replied. Then something clicked, and I asked if he was Adam. He gave me a very slow yes, like he was confused out of his mind as well. But then something in him snapped, and he yelled out, "Holy fuck!" He proceeded to tell me that for the past 5 years, he thought he'd been talking to me. Every single picture he'd ever seen of Maggie had actually been pictures of me. I was completely dumbfounded, and we didn't know what to say to each other at first. So he pulled out his phone and showed me proof. He had tons of pictures of me saved on his phone. He then went to their messages and showed me that she'd been sending them to him. I felt, and still feel, completely sick to my stomach. I got out my phone and showed him real pictures of Maggie. I suggested maybe they could just talk when she got off work. He was really mad at this point. I said maybe we should call her first and let her know he was here. So I did that, and she started flipping out, saying she wasn't coming home, telling him to leave, and that she wouldn't talk to him. He called her and started yelling at her over the phone. After everyone calmed down slightly, she eventually came home. He was hurt and accusing. She was crying, and I was sitting there awkwardly watching this whole thing go down. She told him that she was still the same person he'd had feelings for, and he screamed at her, "No, I thought I was in love with your roommate." That completely made her break down, so I told him maybe he should leave for the night and everyone should have their own space. He agreed, and after he left, she went completely psychotic on me and started throwing everything around the living room. She told me she hated me. I started crying. It was an absolute mess. I left to stay with a friend and haven't been back, so I don't know what's happened since. I feel like I have no idea who the person I'm living with is, and I feel weirdly violated. Do I move out? Do I try to call her? She hasn't even texted me. I ended up having a phone call with Adam, mostly because I wanted to know about the pictures she'd sent. Turns out she'd sent pics of me in my underwear, plus naked pictures that weren't actually of me or her. We're assuming she got those from Google. He feels really bad and is actually having a hard time processing all of this. I assured him I don't blame him at all for the underwear pics or anything like that. He told me that they'd actually FaceTimed, but she would never show her face, only the top of her head and hair, which is dyed a similar color to mine. Never thought anything of this before, but now I think it might be really weird. Her excuse was that she felt like she looked bad on video, was self-conscious, didn't have makeup on, etc. He said he didn't think it was weird at the time. He also told me he'd tried tons of times to arrange visits to meet, and she came up with excuses every single time. He said he'd been mostly content to talk through text and phone calls up until this point. He's going to try reaching out to her one more time to talk about everything, but he's moving on. As for me, I'm not sure I can break my lease yet, but I'm going ahead and moving out to stay with a friend until it's over. We briefly talked when I went back to the apartment, and she sort of half apologized but is still pretty hostile and defensive, so I'm giving her space. I feel bad for her, but I don't think our friendship is going to survive this whole thing. I stared at my phone, trying to process everything that had happened. The apartment felt different now, tainted by years of deception I never knew existed. My hands shook as I scrolled through my social media, suddenly paranoid about every photo I'd ever posted. How many had she saved? How many had she sent to Adam? The friend I was staying with knocked on the bedroom door and peeked in. I waved her away, needing space to think. My mind raced through 5 years of memories, searching for signs I'd missed. All those times Maggie insisted on taking photos together, claiming she wanted to document our friendship, the way she'd always volunteer to be the photographer, then ask for copies of every picture. Her obsession with matching my style, dyeing her hair similar colors, buying the same clothes. I pulled up our text conversations, scrolling back months. There were dozens of photos I'd sent her casually, getting ready for work, trying on new outfits, random selfies when I was bored. Each one now felt like a violation. She'd asked for my opinion on clothes, makeup, hairstyles, and I'd innocently sent pictures, never imagining they were being forwarded to someone else. My phone buzzed. Adam again. I hesitated before answering. He sounded exhausted, explaining that Maggie had finally responded to his messages. She'd sent him a long rambling text about how she never meant for it to go this far, how she'd been too scared to show her real self after sending my photo initially. According to her, it started as one picture when he asked what she looked like, then spiraled out of control. She claimed she'd tried to tell him the truth multiple times but couldn't risk losing him. I listened, feeling sick. He mentioned she'd begged him not to tell me about the underwear photos, insisting they were sent during vulnerable moments when she felt insecure about her own body. The excuse made my skin crawl. Those were private moments, captured without my knowledge in what I thought was the safety of of my own home. After hanging up, I grabbed my laptop and started searching for apartment listings. The lease had 4 months left, but I couldn't imagine returning there. Every corner would remind me of her betrayal. The bathroom where she must have taken photos of me changing. The living room where we'd spent countless nights talking about Adam, her gushing about their conversations while I sat there, unknowingly being used as her visual representation. I opened my banking app, calculating what I could afford. Moving would drain my savings, but my sanity was worth more than money. As I browsed listings, my phone lit up with notifications. Mutual friends were texting, having heard something was wrong. I ignored them all. How could I explain this? How could I make them understand the violation I felt? The next morning, I forced myself to return to the apartment while Maggie was at work. I needed clothes and important documents. The living room still showed signs of her meltdown. A broken picture frame, magazines scattered across the floor, a throw pillow with its stuffing spilling out. I stepped carefully around the mess, heading straight to my room. Everything looked normal, but it felt contaminated. I grabbed trash bags and started throwing clothes in randomly. My laptop, important papers, toiletries. I moved quickly, wanting to minimize my time there. As I packed, I noticed things I'd overlooked before. The angle of my mirror, perfectly positioned to see into the hallway. The way my dresser had been slightly moved, creating a gap where someone could stand and peer in. In the bathroom, I found myself studying the layout differently. The shower curtain I'd never fully closed because I lived with another woman and didn't think about privacy. The hook on the back of the door where I'd hang my robe, all innocent before, now sinister. I hauled the bags to my car, making multiple trips. On my final return, I found Maggie's door ajar. I hadn't intended to snoop, but something drew me in. Her room was chaos, clothes everywhere, empty wine bottles on the nightstand, tissues littering the floor. But what caught my attention was her desk. Photos covered every inch, printouts of pictures I recognized as mine. Some were casual shots from our social media, but others were clearly taken without my knowledge. Me cooking in the kitchen, absorbed in my phone, me napping on the couch, me getting mail in pajamas. Each image felt like another violation, another moment stolen. Her laptop sat open, and against my better judgment, I glanced at the screen. Her messages with Adam were still up. I saw my own face staring back at me from their chat, photo after photo I'd never consented to share. The dates went back years, 5 years of my life, curated and presented as hers. I backed out of the room, my heart pounding. This was worse than I'd imagined. This wasn't just insecurity or a mistake that spiraled. This was calculated, obsessive deception. As I locked the apartment door behind me, I made a decision. I pulled out my phone and started typing a message to our landlord, explaining I needed to discuss breaking the lease due to an unsafe living situation. Then I texted Adam, asking if he'd be willing to provide written documentation of what Maggie had done. I'd need evidence if I wanted out of the lease without destroying my credit. He responded immediately, agreeing to help however he could. He mentioned he'd been going through their old conversations, screenshotting everything related to the photos. The evidence was overwhelming. Hundreds of images over 5 years, elaborate lies about her life that were actually stories about mine. I drove back to my friend's place, my car loaded with my belongings. The reality of starting over felt overwhelming, but less terrifying than returning to that apartment. As I unpacked, I tried to focus on practical matters, finding a new place, figuring out the lease situation, deciding whether to tell our mutual friends the truth. But my mind kept drifting to darker thoughts. If she'd been this deceptive about one thing, what else had she lied about? My heart breaks seeing all those photos covering her desk. She was literally just living her normal life like cooking or napping. The way she describes feeling like every corner of that apartment is contaminated now really hits me because that was supposed to be her safe space, her home, and now she can't even look at her own bedroom mirror the same way. Had she gone through my personal items, read my journals, accessed my laptop? The paranoia grew with each passing hour. That evening, Maggie started calling repeatedly. I let it go to voicemail each time, not ready for another confrontation, but she persisted, the calls coming every few minutes. Finally, she left a message. Her voice sounded different, not the hysterical anger from before, but something colder. She accused me of trying to steal Adam, of deliberately sabotaging her relationship. She claimed I'd always been jealous of what she had with him, that I couldn't stand seeing her happy. The delusion in her words was frightening. More messages followed, each more unhinged than the last. She threatened to make my life difficult if I tried to break the lease. She said she had things of mine that I'd want back. She hinted at knowing personal information about me that I wouldn't want shared. I screenshot everything, building my own documentation. Adam did the same on his end, forwarding me the evidence he'd compiled. The pattern was clear and disturbing. She'd created an entire false life using my image, telling him stories about her job that were actually about mine, sharing her achievements that were my accomplishments. The next few days blurred together. I focused on apartment hunting while fielding increasingly aggressive messages from Maggie. She alternated between tearful apologies and vicious threats. I stopped responding, following advice to document everything but not engage. Adam and I talked daily, both of us processing the betrayal. He shared more details about their relationship that made my stomach turn. She'd sent him photos from her vacation, actually my trip to visit family. She'd described her promotion at work, my achievement from 6 months ago. Every milestone in my life had been co-opted and presented as hers. I spent the following morning at my friend's kitchen table, laptop open to apartment listings, while simultaneously organizing the evidence Adam had sent. Each screenshot revealed another layer of deception. Maggie had told him about her childhood dog that died when she was 12, my golden retriever, Max. She'd shared stories about her difficult relationship with her father, my struggles, my pain, twisted into her narrative. My friend Victoria emerged from her bedroom, still in pajamas, and placed a mug of coffee beside me. She'd been incredibly patient, letting me crash in her spare room without asking too many questions. I'd given her the basic outline, but the full scope of Maggie's deception felt too overwhelming to explain. The apartment search wasn't going well. Everything in my price range was either too far from work or in questionable neighborhoods. I'd contacted 3 landlords already, but without references from my current place, they were hesitant. The 4th listing looked promising, a studio apartment 6 blocks from my office. I scheduled a viewing for that afternoon. My phone vibrated against the table. Another message from Maggie, this time through social media since I'd blocked her number. The message message was lengthy, alternating between accusations and pleas. She claimed I'd always wanted to be the center of attention, that I deliberately flaunted myself in front of her to make her feel inferior. The projection was staggering. I screenshot the message and added it to my growing folder of evidence. The landlord had responded to my email, agreeing to discuss the lease situation, but warning that breaking it early would typically forfeit my security deposit and potentially impact my rental history. I needed that deposit for a new place. Adam texted, asking if we could meet in person. He was struggling to process everything and thought talking face-to-face might help. I agreed, suggesting a coffee shop downtown. Neutral territory felt safer than meeting anywhere too personal. The studio apartment viewing came first. The building was older but well-maintained, with secure entry and a responsive landlord. The space was small but clean, with large windows that let in natural light. I filled out an application on the spot, hoping my employment history would outweigh the lack of recent references. At the coffee shop, Adam looked exhausted. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his usual put-together appearance seemed frayed at the edges. We found a corner table, far from other customers. He pulled out his phone, showing me more messages from Maggie he'd received that morning. She'd sent him dozens of texts, each more desperate than the last. She insisted their connection was real, that the photos didn't matter because she was still the person he'd fallen for. She begged him to video call her, promising to show her real face this time. The messages grew increasingly erratic as he didn't respond. He asked about the apartment situation, and I explained my search for a new place. He mentioned feeling guilty that I was being forced to move because of something that wasn't my fault. I assured him that leaving was my choice. I couldn't stay somewhere that felt so violated. We discussed the evidence we'd both collected. Between his screenshots and my documentation of her recent behavior, we had a substantial file. He suggested I might need it not just for the lease, but also to protect myself if she escalated further. The thought hadn't occurred to me, but his concern felt valid. After coffee, I returned to Victoria's apartment to find several missed calls from unknown numbers. My voicemail was full, all messages from Maggie, using different phones to bypass my block. Her voice in each message grew more agitated. She demanded I return to the apartment to talk. She threatened to throw away my belongings if I didn't respond within 24 hours. She cried about losing her best friend over a misunderstanding. I forwarded the voicemails to my email, creating backups of everything. Oh my god, the way Maggie showed up at her workplace and grabbed her arm is crazy. I can literally feel how trapped and anxious she must have been in that moment, especially with everyone watching. It's so hard to see her having to give up her furniture and belongings just to feel safe, but Victoria is being such a W friend by letting her stay with her. I mentioned the 5 years of photos, the evidence Adam had, and my need for space to process everything. I didn't expect everyone to take sides, but I wouldn't let her lies go unchallenged. More friends reached out as the day progressed. Some had already sensed something was off about Maggie's story. The timeline didn't make sense, and her increasingly frantic messages were raising red flags. Others seemed unsure what to believe. I provided the same factual response to each, then muted the group chats. I couldn't handle being at the center of this drama. The scheduled move-out day arrived. I met the maintenance supervisor at the apartment, grateful for his presence. Maggie wasn't supposed to be there, but I half expected her to show up anyway. The apartment felt different in daylight, smaller, sadder, full of memories I no longer trusted. I worked quickly, filling boxes with essentials. In my closet, I found more evidence of her obsession. Photos of me tucked behind her clothes, printouts of my social media posts with notes written on them. One particularly disturbing find was a notebook filled with details about my life, my work schedule, my favorite restaurants, notes about my family and other friends. It read like a study guide for becoming me. I photographed everything before taking the notebook. This went beyond catfishing or insecurity. This was a systematic attempt to steal my identity, piece by piece. The maintenance supervisor, who'd been politely avoiding asking questions, finally spoke up. He mentioned that Maggie had been asking him about installing cameras in the apartment last month. He'd refused, citing privacy concerns for both tenants. My skin crawled, thinking about what she might have captured if he'd agreed. We loaded my boxes into my car. I left my key on the kitchen counter with a note for the landlord, officially giving notice that I wanted to be removed from the lease. Whether Maggie cooperated or not, I was done with this place. Back at Victoria's, I unpacked the notebook. Reading through it in detail was surreal. She'd documented conversations we'd had years ago, noting my opinions on everything from movies to politics. There were practice signatures that looked like mine, lists of my passwords she'd apparently figured out, even notes about my menstrual cycle. The violation felt complete. I spent that evening changing every password I could think of. Email, social media, banking, work accounts, everything got updated. I enabled two-factor authentication wherever possible. The paranoia felt justified given what I'd discovered. Adam sent a text saying he'd made it home safely. Maggie was still contacting him, but less frequently. He'd blocked her on everything except email, keeping one line open in case she said something we needed to document. He asked how the move-out had gone, and I sent him photos of the notebook. His response was immediate and horrified. The next few days passed in a blur of preparation for the studio move. I bought minimal furniture, just essentials to get started. Victoria helped me transport everything, and we spent an afternoon setting up my new space. It was small, but mine. No shared walls with someone who'd betrayed me. No constant anxiety about what she might do next. My first night in the new apartment, I actually slept well. The neighborhood was quiet, the locks were secure, and for the first time in over a week, I felt safe. I'd given my new address to only 3 people: Victoria, my supervisor, and my parents. Everyone else could wait until I felt more settled. Work returned to normal as I came back to the office. Security had a photo of Maggie and instructions not to let her in. My colleagues were professional, not prying into what had happened. The routine felt good, stabilizing. Then the packages started arriving. The first one appeared at my office, a small box with no return address. Inside was a photo album filled with pictures of us together over the years. Every photo had my face scratched out. The message was clear but disturbing. Security took the package, adding it to their documentation. The second arrived at Victoria's apartment. Somehow Maggie had figured out where I'd been staying. This one contained items I'd left behind, but they were destroyed. Clothes cut up, jewelry broken, books with pages torn out. Victoria was shaken, and I felt guilty for bringing this chaos into her life. I reported everything to our former landlord, who who informed me that Maggie had been served with an eviction notice. She'd caused more disturbances, and neighbors were threatening to break their leases if she wasn't removed. The landlord agreed to release me from the lease immediately, even refunding part of my security deposit given the circumstances. Adam forwarded me new emails from Maggie. She'd shifted tactics, now claiming she was getting therapy and wanted to apologize properly. She insisted she'd had a breakdown but was getting help. The emails seemed calmer, more rational, but neither of us trusted the change. My new normal settled into a pattern of vigilance, checking my surroundings, documenting any contact attempts, maintaining distance from mutual friends who might inadvertently share information. It was exhausting, but necessary. One evening, while cooking dinner in my studio, I heard a knock. My heart raced. Only 3 people had this address. I peered through the peephole to see a delivery driver with flowers. I hadn't ordered anything. Through the door, I asked him to read the card. "I'm sorry. Please come home. I refused the delivery, my hands shaking. She'd found me. The safety I'd felt evaporated. I called Victoria, who came over immediately. We debated what to do. Moving again seemed extreme, but the violation of my new space felt overwhelming. I decided to wait to see if this was a one-time thing or the start of new harassment. Maggie went from studying for the How to Be You exam to failing the How to Be a Normal Human test completely, and that notebook with practice signatures and cycle tracking, that's not friendship. That's like preparing for identity theft with a side of super creepy stalker vibes. Plus, the maintenance guy deserves a medal for not installing those cameras because, wow, dodged a bullet there. And now she's playing delivery service detective trying to find the new place. I installed a security camera aimed at my door, something I'd never thought I'd need. The precaution felt both excessive and insufficient. Work became my refuge. I threw myself into projects, stayed late, avoided thinking about the situation. My supervisor noticed and gently suggested I consider talking to someone professional about everything. The company had an employee assistance program that included counseling. I took the information, though I wasn't ready to use it yet. Adam checked in regularly. He'd started seeing a therapist himself, working through the deception and its impact. He encouraged me to do the same, sharing how it was helping him process the bizarre situation. His progress made me consider it more seriously. 2 weeks passed without incident. I began to relax slightly, hoping Maggie had given up. Then I arrived home to find her sitting outside my apartment door. My blood ran cold. She looked terrible. Unwashed hair, wrinkled clothes, hollow eyes. She stood when she saw me, hands raised as if to show she meant no harm. I stayed by the stairwell, ready to run. She started talking, her words tumbling out in a rush. She said she understood why I was angry, that she'd been sick but was getting better. She claimed the therapy was helping her understand why she'd done what she did. She just wanted 5 minutes to explain. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, but something in her desperation made me pause. Not compassion exactly, but a recognition that this needed to end somehow. I told her she had 2 minutes, but I was staying by the stairs. She launched into an explanation that was part apology, part justification. She talked about feeling invisible her whole life, about how I seemed to have everything come easily. When Adam had asked for a photo that first time, she'd sent mine on impulse, then couldn't take it back. The lie had spiraled, becoming an addiction. She'd lived vicariously through my image, creating a fantasy life where she was confident, successful, loved. The confession might have been sympathetic if not for the years of deception, the stolen photos, the detailed documentation of my life. I told her that understanding why didn't excuse what she'd done. She'd violated my privacy, stolen my identity, and was now stalking me. Her reasons didn't matter. She started crying, begging for forgiveness. She promised to leave me alone if I just said I forgave her. The manipulation was transparent. She needed absolution to feel better about herself. I told her forgiveness wasn't mine to give right now, maybe not ever. She needed to focus on getting help and leaving me alone. Her demeanor shifted. The tears stopped, replaced by anger. She accused me of being heartless, of destroying her life over just pictures. The mask slipped, revealing the person who'd screamed at me that night in our apartment. I backed toward the stairs, ready to run if needed. She didn't follow, just kept ranting about how I'd ruined everything. I made it to my car and drove to Victoria's, too shaken to stay at my apartment. We called the police to report the incident, though they said without threats or violence there wasn't much they could do. They suggested documenting everything and considering a restraining order if the behavior continued. The security footage from my door camera showed Maggie had been there for 3 hours before I arrived. She'd been talking to herself, occasionally knocking on the door, going through cycles of calm and agitation. The video was disturbing to watch. This wasn't someone making a rational choice to apologize. This was someone unraveling. I stayed with Victoria again that night, both of us double-checking locks and windows. The next morning, I found the courage to call the employee assistance program. The counselor I spoke with specialized in stalking situations. She validated my feelings and offered strategies for staying safe while processing the trauma. Adam called that afternoon. Maggie had sent him a barrage of emails after our encounter, blaming him for turning me against her. She'd attached photos of us from college, highlighting how happy we'd look together. The manipulation was obvious, but still unsettling. I returned to my apartment with Victoria for support. Nothing was disturbed, but I still felt uneasy. The counselor had suggested changing my routines, being unpredictable in my movements. It felt like letting her win, but safety mattered more than principle. Over the next few days, I implemented new safety measures. I varied my routes to work, shopped at different stores, avoided posting anything on social media that might reveal my location. The hypervigilance was exhausting, but each day without incident felt like a small victory. Then came the social media campaign. Maggie created fake accounts to message my friends, family, and coworkers. The messages varied. Some claimed I was mentally unstable. Others suggested I'd stolen money from her. A few even hinted at worse accusations. Most people saw through it immediately, but the damage to my reputation was real. I documented everything, building a case file that now filled an entire binder. The counselor connected me with a legal advocate who specialized in harassment cases. She reviewed everything and said I had more than enough for a restraining order. The process would be stressful, but might be necessary if Maggie continued escalating. Adam faced his own harassment. She'd found his workplace online and started calling, pretending to be clients with complaints about him. His employer was understanding once he explained the situation, but the stress was affecting his job. We supported each other through phone calls, two victims of the same deception trying to reclaim our lives. My parents parents wanted me to move back home temporarily. The offer was tempting, safety and distance, but I refused to let her drive me from the life I'd built. This was my city, my career, my friends. Maggie sitting outside the door for 3 hours talking to herself is giving major, waiting for your crush outside their locker vibes, except way less cute and way more concerning. I love how she went from crying and begging to suddenly getting mad and calling her heartless, and now she's making fake accounts to message everyone. That's taking, if I can't have you, nobody can, to a whole new level of dedication that would be impressive if it wasn't so creepy. I wouldn't let her take that too. The turning point came when she showed up at my office again, this time with printed emails she claimed proved I'd been the one pursuing Adam. Security stopped her at the door, but she made enough of a scene that police were called. This time, with multiple witnesses and prior documentation, they took it seriously. I spent hours at the police station, providing evidence, writing statements, reliving the entire ordeal for official records. The detective assigned to the case seemed sympathetic, but warned that stalking cases were difficult to prosecute. Still, having law enforcement involved felt like progress. The legal advocate helped me file for a restraining order. The court date was set for 2 weeks out. Maggie would be served with papers, notifying her to stay away until the hearing. It felt like both an escalation and a necessary protection. Those 2 weeks were tense. I stayed hypervigilant, expecting retaliation. Instead, there was silence. No messages, no packages, no surprise visits. The quiet was almost worse than harassment. At least when she was contacting me, I knew where she was and what she was thinking. Victoria accompanied me to court. Adam flew in to provide testimony if needed. Seeing him in person again was strange but comforting. Someone who truly understood what this felt like. We sat together in the courthouse hallway, sharing updates and dark humor about the absurdity of it all. Maggie arrived with her parents. I hadn't seen them in over a year, and they looked exhausted. Her mother caught my eye and mouthed, "I'm sorry," before Maggie pulled her away. It was clear they knew something was wrong with their daughter, but were struggling to help her. The hearing itself was straightforward. I presented my evidence, the photos, the notebook, the messages, the police reports. Maggie's lawyer tried to minimize everything as a friendship gone wrong, but the judge seemed unconvinced. When shown the notebook documenting my life in obsessive detail, even Maggie's parents looked disturbed. Maggie testified that she'd been seeking therapy, that she understood her behavior was wrong. She claimed she just wanted closure, to apologize properly. The judge asked why she needed to contact me for closure when therapy should provide that. Her answer was rambling and unconvincing. The restraining order was granted. 1 year of no contact, no messages, no packages, no showing up at my home or work, no contact through third parties. If she violated it, she'd face criminal charges. The relief I felt was overwhelming. As we left the courthouse, her parents approached. They apologized profusely, said they'd been trying to get her help for months. Apparently, this wasn't her first obsessive friendship. There had been similar issues in high school. They were pursuing intensive treatment for her, hoping to address the underlying issues. I felt a moment of sympathy for them. They seemed like good people dealing with an impossible situation, but I maintained my boundaries, thanking them for the apology, but making it clear I needed no contact with their family. Adam and I grabbed coffee after court, processing everything. He was heading home the next day, but promised to stay in touch. We'd formed an odd friendship through this shared trauma. He mentioned he was dating again, slowly learning to trust. It gave me hope that I'd get there too. The weeks following the restraining order were peaceful. No contact attempts, no surprise packages, no fake social media accounts. I slowly began to relax, though I maintained most of my safety precautions. The counselor said it would take time to feel truly secure again. I focused on rebuilding. My friendships, strained by the drama and Maggie's lies, slowly recovered. Most people understood once they heard the full story. A few remained distant, unable to reconcile the Maggie they thought they knew with the person who'd done these things. I respected their need for distance. Work improved without the constant anxiety. I took on new projects, even got a small promotion. My supervisor commended how I'd handled the situation professionally, despite the personal stress. It felt good to be recognized for my resilience. The studio apartment began to feel like home. I decorated slowly, making it mine. Every small addition, a plant, a piece of art, new curtains, felt like reclaiming my life. Victoria visited often, and we cooked dinners together, creating new memories untainted by the past. 3 months into the restraining order, I heard through mutual friends that Maggie had moved back with her parents in another state. She was in intensive therapy, possibly inpatient treatment. Part of me hoped she was getting help, not for her sake, but for whoever might cross her path next. Adam sent occasional updates. He'd had to change his number after she'd found ways to contact him despite blocking, but overall, his life had returned to normal. We joked about writing a book about the experience, though neither of us actually wanted to relive it that thoroughly. My therapy continued. The counselor helped me process not just the stalking, but the grief of losing a friendship I thought was real. We worked through the tendency to blame myself, to wonder what signs I'd missed. She reminded me that predators rely on good people, assuming others have good intentions. 6 months after everything exploded, I finally felt ready to date again. The trust issues were real. I found myself suspicious of anyone too interested in my life, too eager to take photos together. But I pushed through, knowing isolation wasn't the answer. I met someone through work, a consultant on a project who made me laugh during stressful meetings. We took things slowly, and I was upfront about my recent experiences. He was understanding, patient with my need for privacy, and slow trust building. It wasn't the whirlwind romance of movies, but it was healthy and real. The year anniversary of discovering Maggie's deception approached. I'd survived a year of upheaval, fear, legal battles, and rebuilding. The restraining order would expire soon, but I felt equipped to handle whatever came next. I had support systems, legal documentation, and most importantly, I had reclaimed my sense of self. Victoria threw me a small celebration, not for the anniversary itself, but for surviving and thriving despite everything. A few close friends joined us, people who'd stood by me through the chaos. We toasted to resilience, to friendship, to moving forward. That night, I looked through old photos on my phone, pictures with Maggie that I'd kept but hidden. I studied them differently now, seeing the signs I'd missed. The way she always positioned herself to mirror my poses, how she'd insist on taking multiple shots until she got one where we looked similar, the forced smiles that never quite reached her eyes. I deleted them all, not out of anger, anger, but acceptance. That chapter was closed. The girl in those photos, both of us, no longer existed. I'd grown stronger, more cautious, but also more appreciative of genuine connections. She'd hopefully grown too, wherever she was. My phone buzzed with a text from my boyfriend, asking about weekend plans. I smiled, thinking how normal that felt. No anxiety about hidden agendas, no worry about photos being misused. Just regular life with regular problems and regular joys. The studio apartment felt cozy as I got ready for bed. My own space, my own life, my own identity firmly in my control. The journey to get here had been harrowing, but I'd made it. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but none that involved someone trying to steal my life. I turned off the lights, finally at peace. The girl who'd opened her door to Adam that day, confused and innocent, felt like a lifetime ago. I was different now, stronger, wiser, more protective of myself. Maggie had tried to take my identity, but instead, she'd forced me to forge an even stronger one. The restraining order would expire in a month. I'd have to decide whether to renew it or trust that she'd truly moved on. But that was future me's problem. Present me was safe, surrounded by real friends, building a real relationship, living a real life that no one could steal. My phone showed one last notification, Adam sending a funny meme about catfishing. We'd developed a dark humor about the whole thing, finding levity where we could. I sent back a laughing emoji and set my phone aside. The restraining order paperwork felt heavy in my hands as I walked out of the courthouse. Victoria squeezed my shoulder, and Adam nodded supportively from across the hallway. Maggie and her parents had already left through a different exit, their lawyer ushering them away quickly. Back at my studio apartment, I finally allowed myself to breathe. The legal protection was official now. 1 full year where she couldn't contact me, couldn't show up at my door, couldn't send packages or create fake accounts. The relief was overwhelming, but underneath it lurked an uneasy feeling. Paper couldn't stop someone determined enough. I spent the rest of the day organizing my evidence binder, making copies for my records. The detective had kept the originals, but I wanted my own documentation. Page after page of screenshots, photos of the destroyed belongings, printouts of the fake social media accounts she'd created. The notebook I'd found in her room sat at the bottom of the box, its contents still making my skin crawl. Victoria stayed for dinner, helping me cook pasta in my tiny kitchen. We worked in comfortable silence, both processing the day's events. She'd been my rock through all of this, never questioning why I needed to crash at her place, always ready with support when things escalated. I made a mental note to find a way to properly thank her once life settled down. My phone buzzed with a text from Adam. His flight was early the next morning, but he wanted to check in one more time. I assured him I was okay, that the restraining order gave me peace of mind. He mentioned starting therapy back home, working through the deception and betrayal. His therapist specialized in victims of catfishing and identity theft. The fact that there were specialists for this made me realize how common these violations had become. That night, I double-checked all my locks and tested the security camera I'd installed. The red recording light blinked steadily, watching my door. I hated needing it, hated that my safe space required surveillance, but the peace of mind was worth the intrusion. Work the next morning felt almost normal. My supervisor had been briefed on the restraining order, and building security had updated their files. No one treated me differently, which I appreciated. I threw myself into a new project, grateful for the distraction of deadlines and meetings. During lunch, I finally opened the employee assistance program information my supervisor had given me. The counselor I'd spoken with had been helpful, but I knew I needed more consistent support. I scheduled an appointment for the following week, choosing a therapist who specialized in stalking and harassment cases. The afternoon brought an unexpected challenge. A coworker mentioned seeing someone who looked like Maggie near the building that morning. My heart raced, but security footage showed it was just someone with similar hair. The paranoia was exhausting, seeing threats in every woman with dyed hair, every unexpected knock, every unknown number calling my phone. I left work early, varying my route home as the counselor had suggested. 3 different turns, a stop at a random coffee shop, doubling back once to check if anyone was following. It felt ridiculous, but necessary. At the coffee shop, I sat facing the door, watching everyone who entered. This hypervigilance was my new normal. Back at my apartment, I found a package at my door. Oh my gosh, yes, she's taking back control of her life. I love how Victoria threw her a celebration for surviving a whole year. That's what real friends do. And her looking through those old photos and finally seeing all the creepy signs like how Maggie always copied her poses. That gave me chills, but I'm so glad she deleted them all. My body tensed immediately, but the return address was from my mother. Inside were homemade cookies and a note saying she was thinking of me. I'd finally told my parents everything the week before, and they'd taken it better than expected. My mom wanted me to move home, but understood why I needed to stay and reclaim my life here. I spent the evening updating my passwords again, enabling additional security features on all my accounts. 2-factor authentication, security questions only I would know, alerts for any login attempts. The digital fortress I was building felt both protective and prison-like. Victoria called to check in. She mentioned that mutual friends were asking about me, wondering why I'd been distant lately. I'd avoided most social situations since everything exploded, not ready to answer questions or deal with potential flying monkeys who might inadvertently share information with Maggie. Victoria offered to host a small gathering at her place, just close friends who understood the situation. I agreed, knowing isolation would only make things worse. The next few days passed quietly. I worked, went to therapy, maintained my safety routines. The therapist was excellent, helping me process not just the recent trauma, but the entire 5-year deception. We talked about trust, about how predators choose their victims, about the difference between healthy friendship and obsessive behavior. She assured me that none of this was my fault, that Maggie's actions were calculated and deliberate. During one session, we discussed the notebook I'd found. The therapist explained that documenting someone's life to that degree went beyond simple admiration or even obsession. It was a form of psychological possession. Maggie hadn't just wanted to use my image. She'd wanted to become me, to live the life she perceived I had. The violation went deeper than stolen photos. It was an attempt to steal my very identity. I started journaling on the therapist's recommendation, processing my emotions through writing. The first entries were angry, full of rage at the betrayal and violation. Gradually, they became more reflective, examining our friendship and looking for signs I'd missed. The therapist reminded me that hindsight was different from willful blindness. blindness. I'd trusted a friend, which was normal and healthy. Maggie had exploited that trust. 2 weeks after the restraining order, I got a call from our former landlord. Maggie had finally vacated the apartment, leaving it in terrible condition. Holes in the walls, damaged fixtures, trash everywhere. The landlord was pursuing her for damages, but wanted to let me know my portion of the security deposit would be returned in full. One less financial worry. Adam and I maintained regular contact through texts and occasional calls. He was doing better, his therapy helping him process the bizarre situation. He'd started dating someone new, taking things slowly, and being upfront about his past experience. It gave me hope that trust could be rebuilt after such a fundamental betrayal. The small gathering at Victoria's apartment was a turning point. Just 5 close friends, people who'd known both Maggie and me for years. They'd all received her frantic messages and fake social media contact, but none had believed her version of events. One friend, Sarah, mentioned that Maggie had exhibited similar behavior in college with another girl, though not to this extreme. The pattern was disturbing. This wasn't an isolated incident, but an escalating behavior pattern. Work continued to be a refuge. I excelled at the new project, earning praise from clients and management. My supervisor mentioned a potential promotion opportunity in a few months. The professional success felt like reclaiming part of myself that Maggie had tried to steal. My accomplishments were mine alone. One evening, while grocery shopping, I thought I saw her. My body went cold, adrenaline surging. But when the woman turned, it was a stranger. The physical response to perceived threat was exhausting. My therapist explained this was normal PTSD response, that my body was trying to protect me from future harm. We worked on grounding techniques and coping strategies. I decided to take a self-defense class, not because I expected physical confrontation, but because I needed to feel capable of protecting myself. The instructor was understanding when I explained my situation in vague terms. The class was empowering, teaching me not just physical techniques, but awareness and confidence. 3 months into the restraining order, I finally felt stable enough to consider dating. A colleague from another department had asked me for coffee several times. He was patient, understanding when I explained I needed to take things slowly. Our first date was in a very public place during daylight hours. I found myself checking exits and watching for familiar faces, but managed to enjoy myself despite the hypervigilance. The therapist encouraged me to reclaim activities Maggie and I had done together. I started visiting museums again, going to restaurants we'd frequented, watching movies we'd enjoyed. Each activity felt like taking back a piece of my life. The memories were complicated, not all bad, which somehow made it worse. There had been genuine moments of friendship mixed with the deception. I learned through mutual friends that Maggie was in an intensive outpatient program in her parents' state. Part of me hoped she was getting real help, addressing whatever drove her to such extreme behavior. But mostly, I was just grateful for the distance between us. The restraining order felt more effective with several states as an additional buffer. My new relationship progressed slowly but steadily. He understood my need for privacy, my reluctance to take photos together, my careful approach to sharing personal information. When I finally told him the full story, he was horrified but supportive. He offered to install additional security at my apartment, but I declined. I needed to feel safe on my own terms. 6 months after the restraining order, I achieved a major milestone. A full week without checking over my shoulder, without scrutinizing every unknown woman, without that constant underlying anxiety. My therapist celebrated this progress, reminding me that healing wasn't linear, but this was significant. I decided to redecorate my studio apartment, making it truly mine. New paint, new furniture arrangement, photos of my real life with real friends. Each change felt like claiming space that was entirely my own, untainted by the past. Victoria helped me pick out colors and arrangements, turning it into a fun project rather than a necessity. Work offered me the promotion, which came with a nice raise and more responsibility. I accepted immediately, seeing it as another step forward. My professional life was thriving despite, or perhaps because of, everything I'd overcome. The strength I'd found through this ordeal translated into confidence in other areas. Adam visited the city for business, and we met for dinner. It was surreal sitting across from him in a nice restaurant, both of us so different from that chaotic day when he'd shown up at my door. We could even laugh about some aspects of it now, though the underlying violation remained serious. He was doing well, his new relationship healthy and built on honesty. 8 months into the restraining order, I received a letter from Maggie's parents. My hands shook as I opened it, but the contents were surprising. They wrote to update me that Maggie was in residential treatment, making progress but still having significant issues. They wanted me to know they were ensuring she had no access to computers or phones, that she was being closely monitored. They didn't ask for forgiveness or contact, just wanted to provide reassurance that they were taking her behavior seriously. I showed the letter to my therapist, who helped me process the complex emotions it raised. Relief that she was getting help, anger that it had taken so long, sadness for her parents dealing with this situation. We decided I wouldn't respond. Maintaining no contact was crucial for my continued healing. My relationship reached a significant milestone when I felt comfortable enough to let him stay overnight at my apartment. The vulnerability of having someone in my space while I slept was huge, but I was ready. Waking up to someone I'd chosen to trust felt like a victory over the fear Maggie had instilled. The 1-year anniversary of discovering the deception approached. I'd survived a full year. The shock of discovery, the escalating harassment, the legal battles, the slow rebuild of my life. The woman I was now felt so different from the one who'd opened the door to Adam that day. Stronger, more cautious, but also more appreciative of genuine connections. Victoria suggested marking the anniversary somehow, not celebrating the trauma, but acknowledging my survival and growth. We decided on a small dinner with the friends who'd supported me throughout. No big production, just people who'd proven their loyalty when things got complicated. 10 months into the restraining order, I made a significant decision. The studio apartment had served its purpose as a safe haven, but I was ready for something bigger. I found a 1-bedroom in a security building with multiple access controls. The additional space felt like expansion after a period of necessary contraction. Moving day was emotional. Packing up the studio meant leaving behind the space where I'd rebuilt myself. But the new apartment represented growth, moving forward rather than just surviving. Victoria helped me move, joking that she was glad to have her spare room back, but would miss our impromptu sleepovers during the worst worst of the crisis. My therapist and I discussed preparing for the restraining order's expiration. We developed safety plans and coping strategies. I decided not to renew it unless Maggie attempted contact again. The legal protection had served its purpose, but I didn't want to live in perpetual fear. I was stronger now, had support systems, knew the warning signs. 11 months in, life felt remarkably normal. Work was fulfilling, my relationship was healthy, friendships had not only recovered, but deepened through the trial. I still had moments of anxiety, still checked my security camera, still varied my routines. But these precautions had become background noise rather than consuming obsessions. I finally felt ready to engage with social media again, though carefully. New accounts with privacy settings locked down tight. I posted sparingly, never location tags, never real-time updates. But sharing moments with friends felt like another reclaimed freedom. The first photo I posted was from the dinner with supportive friends. No tags, no details, just genuine smiles. My boyfriend suggested a weekend trip for the 1-year anniversary of the restraining order. Leaving the city felt both scary and liberating. I'd been in protective mode for so long that vacation seemed impossible, but I agreed, choosing a quiet beach town where we could relax without crowds. The trip was perfect. For 2 days, I didn't think about Maggie, didn't check over my shoulder, didn't analyze every stranger. I just existed in the moment, walking on the beach, eating good food, enjoying simple companionship. It felt like the final piece of reclaiming myself, the ability to be present without constant vigilance. As the restraining order expiration approached, I prepared myself mentally. I'd done everything possible to protect myself. Security measures, support systems, documentation, therapy. Whatever happened next, I was ready. The fear would probably never fully disappear, but it no longer controlled my life. The day came and went without incident. No contact, no packages, no sign of her. Look at her taking that weekend beach trip and actually relaxing without checking over her shoulder every 5 seconds. Can we talk about how perfect it is that the restraining order just quietly expired with no drama, no packages, no Maggie showing up, just completely peaceful, bro. I'd been braced for something, but the silence continued. My therapist reminded me this was the best possible outcome. The order had served its purpose, creating space for both of us to heal and move forward separately. In our final regular therapy session, we reviewed how far I'd come, from a woman who'd discovered her roommate had stolen her identity to someone who'd rebuilt her life stronger than before. The trauma would always be part of my story, but it no longer defined me. I'd continue therapy monthly rather than weekly, a sign of progress. I stood in my new apartment, looking around at the life I'd built. Real friends who'd proven their loyalty. A job where I was valued for my actual accomplishments. A relationship built on honesty and gradual trust. A space that was entirely mine, where every photo on the wall was chosen by me, of moments I'd actually lived. My phone buzzed with a text from Victoria, confirming dinner plans for the weekend. Adam had sent a funny meme about apartment hunting, his dark humor about our shared experience still connecting us. My boyfriend asked about grocery preferences for the dinner he was cooking. Normal life, normal problems, normal joys. The girl who'd opened her door that day to find her life had been stolen felt like a different person. That version of me had been trusting to the point of naivety, unable to imagine such calculated deception from a friend. This version was wiser, more protective of herself, but hadn't let the experience close her off from genuine connection. I pulled out my journal, writing a final entry about this chapter of my life. Not because the story was over, I'd likely carry some effects forever, but because I was ready to stop defining myself by this experience. I was more than a victim of identity theft, more than a survivor of stalking. I was just Summer, living my actual life, surrounded by people who knew and valued the real me. The sun set outside my window, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new joys, new experiences that were mine alone. I closed the journal and started preparing dinner, content in the knowledge that my life, my real, authentic, hard-won life, was finally, fully my own. Seeing how far you've come from that horrible day when you found all those photos, and now you're standing in your own space surrounded by real friends who truly care about you, getting sweet texts about dinner plans and funny memes, living this beautiful normal life that you fought so hard to get back, and the way you wrote that last journal entry saying you're more than what happened to you just shows how strong and amazing you are. That's it for now. Have a good one, and I'll see you next time.